Hello everyone, welcome to the Bexhill West Christmas special. I'm James. So in today's video we're going to talk a little bit about why this project has come about, why I'm putting it on YouTube and what my future plans are. It seems like Christmas is a time of, or should be a time of optimism and hope. So what I thought I'd do is talk about some of my plans for the new year, particularly with the model, but also for the channel more generally. The channel's grown sort of vastly beyond what I imagined it would be. And I'm committing quite a bit of time to it, which I'm quite enjoying. So I've got some plans for the future. We'll talk about those. Now, those who saw my silly little video I put out a few days ago will have maybe noticed that the station platforms and the station canopy structure is more or less complete now. And we will get into that, but I'm going to save that for another video which I hope to get out over this Christmas period. Now, I was really quite heartened by a comment 2 or 3 weeks ago by one of the viewers who had said that he'd found the videos quite entertaining and was helping him through his isolation lockdown. And it got me thinking that whilst I'm producing these videos, and I started making these videos just for a record for myself really as much as anything else, I certainly don't think I've got any particular skills that anybody else is necessarily interested in. But whilst I started it really for my own amusement, it's become clear that some people are enjoying the videos and it's helping them pass the time. So with this particular viewer, Michael, in mind, today's video is going to be a bit of a sort of a fireside chat, if you like. So please, if it's the making elements that you're interested in, do feel free to skip on and come back for the next video when we're going to look in some detail at those platforms in particular. But for today, we're just going to have a bit of a rambling chat, and I hope that some of the things I cover and some of my future plans and ideas for the model are of interest to you. Let's get started. So really, my interest in the Bexhill West branch line began with the contents of this folder. You see, back in 2012, my middle daughter was at primary school, and she went primary school was at Crowhurst. Now, Crowhurst was the village where the junction for the Bexhill West branch line was, where it met the Hastings line. And this was a project that she produced at the time. I think she had to do a project about a piece of local history, and she produced this sort of document, if you like, that ran through a little bit of the history of the line, some of how it was built, various stations and all sorts of bits and pieces in here. They're really quite fascinating. Signal box diagrams, I forgot about these and I've just had fun this morning having a look at those. But really the bit that was of most interest to me at the time was the viaduct. Now, there was as part of the construction of the line, this massive 17-arch viaduct built. Now, sadly, that got destroyed. It was blown up, would you believe? And it's no longer with us. However, I've always been quite interested in it. And about 18 months ago, when sort of looking for a project, I came up with an idea of building the viaduct. So I'll show you quickly what I had in mind. So then, fast forward to about 18 months ago, and I just finished building my model of Pegasus Bridge. And I put that on YouTube, and I was casting around for another idea, another project, and I had this idea that it would be quite good fun to make a model of the 17-arch viaduct between Crowhurst and Sidley. And in my head I imagine this as being an O-gauge structure, and I can't remember, I think it's scaled out at about 9 metres long or something like that. It may even have been a bit longer. And I planned to build it with a loop at each end, and it would just have a train that trundled backwards and forwards, kind of looping round all day. And I thought this would be almost like a bit of an art installation, in as much as when right at the end of the line's history, it really was just a single sort of engine and a push-pull set that ran backwards and forwards between Crowhurst and Bexhill, and you had all this wonderful railway with its fantastic buildings and just a silly little 2-car train whizzing backwards and forwards. And so I imagined it would be fun to have this fantastic model with every little brick detail shown and just a fairly humble train running across it. And so this was my idea. And in fact, it was at that time I was looking to put a little slideshow of my Pegasus Bridge model up on YouTube, and so I thought, well, I'll call the channel Bexhill West, intending that I'll just have videos of me building a viaduct. Now, what you see on screen is the sort of the first 3D CAD kind of thoughts around how that viaduct might work, and what my plan was a fairly simple steel framed inner structure, and then all the brickwork panels would attach to it with magnets. So the idea that the thing would be fairly self-supporting, and I even went as far as doing some calculations on it and working out what the sag would be across its span, and could I make this thing so it didn't even need any trestles and it could be just kind of self-supporting and in itself float majestically as though there were no support under it. And I just worked all of that out, and it all seemed to be a goer. But then I drifted off and got involved in the castle project, the Austrian castle, which some of you may have seen in a previous video. And so the idea of developing this viaduct sort of didn't disappear, but it just shifted from my focus for a while. And so that was it for a bit. Over the autumn of 2019, I focused on the castle project, knowing that I was going to change job and it would be less convenient for me to continue with that project. And so at Christmas time last year, I changed jobs, and really my focus had to be upon my job, not this idea of building a mammoth viaduct. However, I did laser cut many of the arches, and I used the arches to sort of experiment with settings on the laser cutter for doing brickwork, and they were quite impressive. They were sort of this sort of size, and they looked really good. However, it was getting through quite a lot of material and it was taking a long time to do. So as I sort of dialed in the settings, I thought I ought to focus on something a bit smaller. And so the thing I decided to focus on was the end wall of the goods shed for Bexhill West Goods Yard, and really I had no intention of taking that any further. It was just something to practice with. And sure enough, once I'd done that, I thought, well, I'd best do another wall for it, and I got halfway through that and I thought, well, why am I doing a goods shed? It ought really to be the station building, and well, you know how it goes, it sort of spiralled. And so I decided, this was just about when the first lockdown occurred, that really what I ought to be doing was build all of the buildings, and really that takes us pretty much up to the start of this channel. And in fact, I was looking around for other things to do, and I connected with Paul Apps from Sandling Junction and got involved with his goods shed model, and we were just having a chat with Paul, and Paul had seen my little slideshow of Pegasus Bridge, and I think at the time I had about 9 subscribers or something, and he said, have you not thought about doing YouTube properly? And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, why not? You know, why not? But I thought if I was going to have a go at doing YouTube properly, then I ought to fully immerse myself in it and try and have a regular schedule for uploading, and try and have some end game in sight. And so the idea was simply, when the channel started, just to build the various buildings at Bexhill West. And that takes us pretty much up to where we are now. Except, of course, as this started and people started following along, I realised that the buildings really needed to be set into some context. And so I've begun this process of building the diorama of the whole station area. And hopefully many of you watching this have been following the progress of that. And so really, with that being the journey up until this point, this is a suitable point to sort of reflect and think about the future, and where am I going to go with this model, and what other things could I be bringing to the channel which might be of interest to the viewers. And so let's have a little chat about that. But to do so, we first of all need to look at the track plan for Bexhill West. And here it is. This is the diagram, or the track plan for Bexhill West Station. And you can see we've got the station areas, station platforms, the main lines that ran off to Sidley and then on to Crowhurst, the goods yard, and some carriage sidings. Now the thoughts really was just to build the sort of the length of the station platforms, and that's fine, and because it doesn't go anywhere, you can't run any trains. Now to be honest with you, I'm not really that interested in running the trains. The whole purpose of this project was to build something that I could enjoy taking photographs of. But it's been suggested a few times now, both in the comments here and via emails and stuff, that this might be quite nice to take to an exhibition somewhere. So I need to think a little bit about actually making trains run, or what might be done to extend the scope of this project. And this is what I've got in mind. Now I'm afraid this is where all my production values go out of the window, with this kind of like table tennis bat shaped thing that I've just drawn. And the idea is this is a runaround loop, and this would represent London or Crowhurst Junction even. So trains could leave Bexhill West, come onto the table tennis bat and turn round and go back the other way. Now the idea is that the table tennis bat could have a couple of sidings on, and the principle is that we could have a train on the up line and one in the down line, all ready to go, and you could just do whichever one you want, and then when one road becomes clear, you're ready to run the next train in. But my thinking was that the runaround loops themselves would be detachable, so that could separate off, and we could have several of these which could just clip in. So if you want to run a different couple of trains, they just connect on quite simply. Now these could even be scenic. These could have a little hill on or something to make them a bit more interesting. And I imagine these stacked up next to the model on like a rack, and all the trains could be on display for people to have a look at. So this was my thinking around this, and this does away with the need for a traditional kind of like linear fiddle type of yard, whereby the trains have got to be picked up and turned round. And I'd thought about that with like cassettes even, and you could lift the cassette off and turn it round and put it back, but I thought that's all getting quite complicated. This to me seemed quite simple and could in itself be quite a nice display piece to display the trains that normally you wouldn't see. And very often you know, an exhibition or whatever, you might have the railway line that you look at, and then there's the behind the scenes bit that you don't get to see. Well, I thought with something like this, the behind the scenes bit could be quite visible. I'd thought about mounting several of these things onto a sort of a linear rail, so they could rise and fall vertically. So this display cabinet, for want of another way of describing it, could move up and down and just automatically level up to take the trains in. So I thought this might be an interesting addition to what I'm currently doing. Not such a great deal of work, but it means that trains could run backwards and forwards, and they wouldn't need handling. You wouldn't need to touch them, so they're not going to get broken or damaged or whatever. So that's maybe phase one of the bigger plan. So then that is the idea for the runaround loop. And I'm aware that that's going to be quite a big thing in order to get a full length of train on. But remember, we're talking about Bexhill here. We're not talking about, you know, King's Cross. It's not going to have 13 coach trains to fit onto it. But even so, it's going to be quite big. And I think that's its advantage in that the storage sidings will sort of form a semicircle. There's plenty of room for people, if it was an exhibition, to stand around and have a look at the stock. And the system that I've designed, sort of the detailed design work of it, allows for quite simple interchange of these sections. So I think that's all going to work, and I'll share all of that in a future video. Now, if that's kind of like phase two of the project, then of course phase three of this kind of modular system can be to build sort of extend the main lines out of Bexhill, do the goods yard, and I'm really fascinated by the goods yard. There's loads of buildings, so over 2021 I will be picking on several of the buildings that form the goods yard and be constructing those, and when I've got sort of all the buildings done, then I'll get on with building that section of the model. But being modular, it opens up all sorts of other opportunities. And I remember reading when I was a child about a group of people, I think they may have been musicians, and they had this idea to build a model of the Trans-Nullarbor Railway, which ran across the desert in the middle of Australia, and they built it all to scale. And if I remember correctly, and this is going back to, I don't know, probably sort of the mid-80s, I think they had kind of like sheets of plywood with track on and dowels on each end to join them together, and I think they took it to somewhere like Pendine Sands, and they'd set up, I think it may have been hundreds of metres of these boards, and they ran a train up and down, and I think from memory the train had a little blower on or something that blew the sand out of the way. I might have remembered all of that wrong, I might have just made it up in some sort of mad dream, but the point is, if you don't dream big, you'll only achieve small. So with my Bexhill West project, it's all modular. Why not build sections that can clip in? And of course, eventually we could have a Siddeley as well. So the trains have got somewhere to go to, and we can ferry goods between Bexhill and Siddeley. Maybe the viaduct could reappear. Now, I have a sort of a longer sort of, I don't know, maybe it could be a 5-year goal, which I'll talk about another time of quite how this will go. But certainly for 2021, my focus will be to get Bexhill West complete, the runaround loop done, and possibly some form of extension by the way of into the goods yard and the carriage sidings. As for when this thing could potentially go on display, well, the line originally opened in I think it was 1st of June 1902, so I've set myself the 1st of June 2022 as a deadline, which of course seems a long way away, but of course it isn't really. It's about 16 months or something like that, which I think is a realistic time to have Bexhill done, the runaround area, and some modules in between, not to mention all the rolling stock that I've got planned as well. So with the modular concept sorted out, and the deadline date for having it all done, or at least having something that could go on public show in mind, some thought ought to be given to how the trains might be controlled. Now, the options are standard sort of analog DC control or DCC, and both of which are good, and advantages and disadvantages to each. Currently I'm running it on an analog system, but it is wired up for DCC. But something that occurs to me as being probably quite obvious is that if I were to extend this thing and keep adding modules, I'm likely to run into problems with electrical continuity between boards. It may be possible to make, perfect setup, but this thing is going to be in storage possibly for months at a time without being used. So in addition to dirty track, I've got to expect that connections between each of the modules might also be unreliable. So my solution to that is to investigate radio control. Now, my E1 project, which many of you watching this will know about, I'm building an E1 locomotive, that is going to be fitted with a radio control system, and it will carry its own battery pack, with the idea being that it's entirely independent of track power, so it could run anywhere. It could run on a DCC railway, it could run on an analog one, it could run where there's no electricity whatsoever. And the idea is each train will have its own little handset, and people will be able to just grab a handset and drive a train. So that's something I'm currently working on, and I think I'm going to have the first prototype running probably later on in January. Depends how well I get on with other bits and pieces, but certainly in the next few weeks we'll have a prototype up and running. And one of the I think exciting possibilities that comes with that is the idea of having a two-way radio link and possibly a camera on the locomotive, so we can kind of, you know, we could have a little screen on the controller and kind of get a driver's eye view and count the telegraph poles whizzing by and stuff. So that's something else I'm working on. I think that's going to be quite exciting, and I look forward to sharing that with everyone in the new year. So then, those are all the things that were on the agenda for Bexhill West, which is the core of this channel called Bexhill West. But there are other things I'm working on too, and I'll just briefly mention a couple of those things now. I've got some projects I'm working on for some of the viewers of this channel, and hopefully with their permission, when they get to a point where there's something to show, those sort of side projects will make an appearance on the channel. Hopefully that will sort of broaden the scope of what's going on here a little bit as well. Now behind me you can see the wonderful Gibson Mill just outside Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, and I had the pleasure of going to Yorkshire in the summer, and amongst things I did, I specifically went to make a photographic study of this, and alongside Bexhill West I've been designing a model of this mill, and that's going to be done at, sort of early in the new year. We should start to see little bits of that, and I'm cautious not to deviate from Bexhill West too much, because of course that's why so many people have subscribed. They've subscribed to that content. But I hope that what I've been working on with the mill might be of interest to viewers. So I'll sort of softly introduce that every now and again. What it will enable me to do is cover a variety of sort of different techniques that I've not covered with Bexhill West, not least of which is the fact it's built out of stone, which will be quite a nice challenge for me, and I hope you find it interesting too. Now behind me I've got another project, and this one's been going on for a little while now, and it's a Bagnall Contractors locomotive in 7 1/4 inch gauge. Now this really is completely sort of off the charts of what's been going on in Bexhill West, and I don't know if there's any interest there from any of you, whether you'd like me to feature this on the channel a little bit. Not very often, this isn't a model engineering channel, but maybe if that's something that you'd like to learn a little bit more about, then do let me know in the comments, and I'll make a point of filming this a little bit and showing you what's involved in it. Certainly there's a completely different skill set involved in producing something like this locomotive behind me than there is with the sort of the model making stuff. But if there's interest, I'll include a little bit of it too, because it might be interesting for some. And so that brings me to the end of the video, which I'm aware has already gone on far too long. And the real reason why I'm making these videos, I got into this a little bit by accident, but I must admit I'm quite enjoying the creative opportunity that making these videos each week has presented me with. And it's all sort of helped along by the fact that I've had so much in the way of really positive feedback from you, the viewer, be that through subscriptions, the lovely comments that seem to get left for me each week, or the emails that I've been getting too, all of which is encouraging me to keep going. Now, I'm aware when I started this at the start of the summer, I had no idea how to make a video, and I was using my phone, and it was all a bit not very good. And I've learnt slowly the processes, and am now much more confident with it. So I look forward to 2021. Hopefully I can improve the quality of the videos a little bit more and keep you entertained. So to everyone who watches, the viewers, and in particular to the subscribers, I'd like to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. And if you've not yet subscribed, then why not consider doing so? I can see from the analytics that about half of the people who watch these videos each week are not subscribed. So if you can, you feel like it, please do. It doesn't cost anything, and you can always unsubscribe. But the more subscribers that I get, the more YouTube will tend to promote these videos, and so the whole thing can sort of grow, which will enable me to produce hopefully better content. Anyway, if you've got any great ideas for things that you'd like to see me cover in the new year, project you might like me to get involved in, or whatever, a nice opportunity, or maybe you've got something you'd like me to come round and film that you think would be of interest to the viewers here, please do let me know. Anyway, until then, thank you all so much for watching. I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Cheerio.